U.S. President Joe Biden says Russia will soon pay a price. Biden's strong words follow a U.S. intelligence report on foreign interference in last November's elections. The report says Russian President Vladimir Putin approved a campaign of misinformation aimed at sowing discord among the voters. Moscow has denied any involvement, just as it has also denied meddling in the 2016 vote, which saw a victory for Donald Trump. Emily Sherwin is in Moscow. Oliver Sallet on the other side of the Atlantic in Washington. To both of you, good evening. Emily, let me start with you. Biden says he considers Putin to be a killer. Strong words there. Any reaction from the Kremlin?
Well, Brent, as you might imagine, that hasn't gone down too well here in Moscow. The Russian Foreign Ministry has now recalled the ambassador to the U.S., the Russian ambassador to the U.S., for consultations about the future of the U.S.-Russian relations. And we saw a rather sober statement from the spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry, who usually has a bent towards kind of dramatic statements. She said that the reason why U.S. relations are in such a bad way is that the U.S. has backed them into a dead end. And she also warned about the fact that worsening relations could be a risk, perhaps a hint at the fact that both countries are nuclear powers. So kind of a sober but also a bit of a threatening statement there. You have to imagine that this is a personal insult against Putin in a country where Vladimir Putin is kind of considered untouchable on the political landscape. Even his critics usually just level accusations at the Kremlin or at the government, but not at Putin himself.
Well, Emily, when Joe Biden says that Putin is a killer, what exactly is the U.S. president referring to?
Well, during Vladimir Putin's time in power, there has been a fairly long list of deaths or assassination attempts of Kremlin critics that, of course, his critics blamed on Vladimir Putin himself, or at least on the system that he created. Just a few examples are, for example, the murder of opposition journalist Anna Politkovskaya in 2006, the murder of opposition politician Boris Nemtsov in 2015, and the failed assassination attempts of Russian spy Sergei Skripal in the UK, and last year of opposition politician Alexei Navalny. Now, those are all attempted murders or murders that were blamed squarely on the Kremlin. The Kremlin has always denied that, and investigations have always have never found a direct link, of course, to Vladimir Putin himself. But Biden could be talking about those.
Oliver, to you in Washington, this intelligence report just published, it blames Moscow for meddling in U.S. elections. To what extent did Russia try to sway the vote?
Well, certainly not a very flattering report. Brendan alleges that Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, directed efforts to help Donald Trump win the 2020 election. In particular, the report tackles covert operations to influence people that were close to Donald Trump. So some analysts believe that one of the persons targeted there could have been Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump's personal lawyer. At the time, he was not mentioned, but if you remember, Giuliani, during the election campaign, pushed those baseless claims of corruption about Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden involving the Ukraine. And that narrative also was pushed by Russian intelligence. And if that sounds familiar to you, then yes, of course it does, because just as a reminder, the same happened or similar happened in 2016. Special counsel Robert Mueller then concluded that Putin was behind a very similar effort. So very much looks like history repeating itself.
Yeah, a lot of repeating going on here. Emily, we expected the Kremlin to reject accusations of election interference this time, just like it did after the 2016 election. But has there been more of a reaction, though?
They've repeated their rejections of election meddling both for 2016 and 2020. The Kremlin spokesperson called this new report wrong, baseless, and unsubstantiated today, and kind of pointed again to the fact that the West is constantly hitting Russia with sanctions. There's very much a narrative here that that is part of a Russophobic campaign on the part of the West.
And Oliver, President Biden, he's threatening Russia with consequences. I mean, how serious can these consequences be, considering that he also says he wants to continue working with Russia where necessary? I think he said, you know, we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah, well, certainly a typical Biden approach. Number one, of course, he stands for the return of diplomacy. That's something that he has reiterated many times since he took office. At the same time, he promised a tougher stance on Russia, in part because, of course, he wants to distance himself from Donald Trump, who benefited a lot from Russian support throughout his presidency. And now you see the first steps, if you will, of a tougher stance. The U.S. just expanded export restrictions on Russia that are from last month as a result of the poisoning of opposition leader Alexei Navalny there. Reportedly, the U.S. is just preparing some new sanctions that could be put in place as soon as next week. So a very different stance, a very different Russia policy under Joe Biden. Donald Trump refused to talk negatively about Russia in public, and now you have Biden calling Putin a killer. So, of course, he is, it looks at least like he is very serious.
Yeah, it sounds that way. And Emily, we know that this White House is certainly not the Trump White House. It's not the Obama White House. There's no reset being sought after here by President Biden. Is Moscow hunkering down for tough times to come?
Well, I think actually Moscow kind of had dashed hopes when it comes to the Donald Trump administration. Surprisingly enough, they expected more from Trump. And as a result, they didn't have high hopes at all for the Biden administration. And in a way, today's statement kind of confirms that. But I do think that they did hope that the U.S. and Russia could have a kind of bare bones working relationship on certain issues, for example, on arms control, on the Iran nuclear deal, which both want to work on. And I think this statement today kind of does come as somewhat of a blow in that sense. This personal insult certainly isn't a good start for those relations, which are already at a pretty low point, I would say.
Yeah, I think there will be more reasons for us three to get together and talk again in the future. Emily Sherwin in Moscow, Oliver Salet in Washington. To both of you, thank you.